everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Thoughts. And today we are talking about Cautious Hero, Episode 1. This hero is too cautious. Before we begin though, I do want to let you guys know that if you would like to have your name shouted out in next week's Cautious Hero video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet, and then tag me at JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's Cautious Hero video. Now, with that said, in this episode in particular, there are two things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the setup of the show, and I want to talk about the humor of the show, since that's basically the two big things that probably everybody's going to be talking about when it comes to Cautious Hero. It's the two big, I think the humor in particular is probably the biggest talking point about the show, since if you don't like it, it's probably not going to be a show that you'll continue to watch. Now, I enjoyed it just fine. I think overall the show has a lot of good moments coming down the pipeline. I think this setup is decent, lends itself to a lot of good comedic moments. I do wonder if maybe they linger on them a little too long at certain points. I do wonder if there's room for improvement. In fact, I'm fairly certain there is a decent amount of improvement to be had, and I do look forward to seeing the show improve as it goes along. I do think that there's a hidden gem here, and I think the show is genuinely pretty funny, and judging from what I saw on Twitter before recording this video, a lot of people seem to like the show, and I'm glad everybody seems to be in agreement that the show's pretty good. Now, did I think it was pretty good? Well, you'll have to watch the video to find out, but let's go ahead and dive into the setup. Namely, I think the gods being sent to pick out specific heroes to save not just one fantasy world, but multiple fantasy worlds is interesting. I've always assumed that there was like multiple fantasy worlds in every isekai that we see, but for the most part, we only ever see the human world very briefly in the premiere, then that's followed up by the fantasy world, and then it's never really addressed again if the gods actually protect more than just two worlds. Here, it's actually specified that most gods end up saving anywhere between like 10 to more than 10, whereas our goddess, the one that we follow, whose name I have forgotten, she has only saved about 5, and she's been around for about 100 years, so she's considered by the other gods to be sort of like the lower rank. She's not like totally the worst, but you know, she's starting out, or at the very least is like kind of just starting up her career as a top-tier goddess. She's working on her craft a little bit. In a sense, she is vaguely Aqua-esque, Aqua from Konosuba, and I will say watching Cautious Hero did make me want to watch Konosuba again, because the vibes I get from the main goddess really reminded me of Aqua in a big way, and that is a compliment. I do, like, if anything reminds me of my top-tier dumb waifu, then like, yeah, that's probably a compliment. I adore Aqua from Konosuba. She's, like I said, one of my top waifus. I don't know if I can necessarily waifu this one up though, because I think she's almost not quite as obnoxious, I suppose. I think with Aqua, the fact that she's so incredibly over the top, as well as the other characters in Konosuba are so over the top, that it makes her feel more, I don't know, more zany, more goofy, more in doing so making her more likable. Whereas with this goddess, she's gonna have to work to impress me a little bit more, since she does attempt to be like normal on the front, and then it sort of breaks down, much like Aqua, but it doesn't hit as hard. It's not as zany as something like Konosuba, but it is still pretty zany. I'll also say that the commentary on the isekai genre and the isekai boom was genuinely pretty cute. I thought it was really clever that they were like aware that like the goddess is picking someone from Japan. So of course the gods would be aware that if she's picking someone specifically from Japan, she would know that the isekai genre exists and was at one point incredibly popular and is still relatively thriving. She even points out that while like initial interest has waned, the fandom for isekai like shows is still around, still popular. And I don't anticipate the isekai genre going away in the same way that the goddess also doesn't really see the isekai boom going away anytime soon. It's definitely subsided. We see less and less isekai as we go on, although from what I've seen from some people online, it feels like isekai will never go away. Some people are really sick of it. I'm not really sick of it. I respect most isekai. I feel like most isekai typically, before they used to start on the wrong foot with me, whereas now they start on the right foot. I'm usually pretty open to most isekai, since they usually tend to do something interesting with the genre, and this show is no exception. I do think the premise of like her summoning this hero and the hero being this sort of like way too concerned about every possible thing that could go wrong, and even though he's overpowered, he's so like nervous about every little thing. That's genuinely pretty funny, and I do want, like, again, like I said at the beginning of the video, I wonder if that joke will get stale or if they'll manage to find a way to constantly make it funnier and funnier. I did chuckle a couple times here. I do think that it does enough different to hold my attention at least for the next 2 episodes. Give it the 3-episode rule for sure. I just like I said, most isekai start off on the right foot with me now, since again most do something different. I just wonder if this will continue to do something different, or if it will just take the one gimmick it has and sort of stretch it as far as it can over the course of the show. Speaking of the hero, though, it is worth, digging into his character a little bit. He is about as cautious as a Dark Souls player, and this dude is facing the Isekai challenge in the same way that I play like JRPGs or just regular RPGs. I usually will grind for hours and hours and hours before I even think about starting the campaign, because I don't want to run into trouble in the midst of the story. Even when I play something like Yakuza, which is a beat 'em up, I purposely will grind through baddies just until I'm at a point where I'm strong enough to just stomp through the rest of the game. So I totally get where the hero's coming from. I think that's, like I said, a really funny premise. I think he's maybe too deadpan, like he's too Saitama-y in his delivery. I think he could do with being a little bit more animated in the same way the goddess is. But that said, he does offset the goddess in a neat way that you don't see in other shows. So I do think their sort of like zany and straight man sort of commentary, or their zany straight man sort of dynamic is interesting. I just wish he was a little bit more goofy. And just in case you were curious, yes, there is quality man service. If you've seen the PVs for the show, you'll know that it started with the hero just training his butt off, and you see the abs and the arms and the back, and he's super built, and he's super attractive, and he is. I do think that Free has maybe spoiled me, like stuff like Free and JoJo's and all that. I think man service has been elevated to such a point that if you're gonna bring man service or fan service, if you're gonna bring that into a show, you gotta deliver tenfold. And I didn't necessarily get like over the top man service in the way that I was expecting. He's handsome, but that's about as far as it goes for the hero. Yes, I did just give a nitpicky critique on man service. Welcome to JoJo Talks Too Much. But speaking of the man service, that brings us nicely into the visuals of the show, which I gotta say, this I will absolutely give the show a compliment on. The visuals at first seem pretty standard. They seem pretty stock. The colors are nice. They're nice and vibrant, really pop. And the character designs are okay. They're sort of basic. The initial look of the show is very basic until we get to a comedy bit, in which case it cranks the visuals up to the nth degree, giving us some very sort of Studio Trigger-esque faces and really genuinely good reaction images for memes in the future. Now, bringing up Studio Trigger I think is an interesting point, because I could have been convinced at certain points, not throughout the whole show, but at certain points, that this was animated by Trigger. It's not, but I could have been convinced that it was, since it has that sort of insane, off-the-wall, crazy, maybe not that great, vibe that Studio Trigger has. Oh wait, did he just say that? Yeah, I'm not really a Studio Trigger guy, but I do respect a lot of their work, even if it may not necessarily be for me. That vibe is here, that sort of over the top, oh my god, look at the crazy faces we can make these characters pull. It's funny to a point. I do think it's maybe a little bit overused in this episode. It didn't necessarily get on my nerves at any point, and some of the faces did make me chuckle, especially that clip at the end, which I am likely showing here on the screen right now. There are some genuinely funny faces in this show, some genuinely funny reactions to stuff that happens, and some genuinely funny moments throughout. There's genuinely like a lot of good stuff here. Like I said, I'm not like bashing the show in any way. I guess I was expecting like a bust-a-gut funny episode, and what I got was sort of a light chuckle, and that's not a bad thing. Now I know what I'm getting into for the next episode. I just had to kind of dial my expectations back a bit. I do think there's room for improvement, like I said. I don't think it's as funny as I wanted it to be. I just wonder if maybe I got my expectations a little bit too high. I had a good time with it. It's a pleasant show. I look forward to seeing the next 2 episodes to decide whether or not I'll stick with it. And yeah, I suppose that's pretty much all my thoughts on the first episode of Cautious Hero. With that said though, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up today's video. I'm feeling pretty comfortable giving this premiere a C tier. It was pretty decent, I enjoyed myself, it was fun. C tier feels appropriate for me. But hey, before we wrap up today's video, as always, I have to give a big shout out to the good folks over on Patreon, namely those in the Earl Grey tier: Amy Beery, Calvin Atkinson, Crowbar of Irony, Dominic, Urza, Ginkotaku, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Mirth Mouser, Omner Garamond, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Steven, Tristan, and Verdon. Thank you guys so much for your continued support over on Patreon, and if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then be sure to check out the first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get over there, as well as access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. But on that note, everybody, that is going to be a video, so I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and if you did, then you've probably been on the internet long enough to know what to do already, so I ain't going to tell you, but I will say that it is appreciated, and if you are feeling stressed out today, you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.